afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday. Norwich City back in action at Carrow Road this weekend. It feels like a while since that Middlesbrough defeat there. So let's hope last game before Christmas, Norwich City can spread some festive cheer and we can get a positive result tomorrow evening against Blackburn Rovers. Adam Harvey, joined by Connor Southwell for your preview show. Obviously, any questions or comments, get them down in the comment section below and we'll come around to those towards the end of the show. Connor, to start, I'm going to take us back to last week, a very cold afternoon in Swansea. Dean Smith obviously came out after the Middlesbrough game, where he sort of said he wanted them to be a different animal when they came back. He clarified that was before the press conference the other day. So just wanted to get your thoughts on last week's performance. I think we spoke obviously on the previous show last week ahead of that Swansea game, and you sort of said you wanted to see some improvements in certain areas from Norwich City. So did you feel like you got those, or what did you make of that performance a week on?
This is interesting because I like many people have observed the analysis from a lot of people since that game, and I've been quite intrigued by it because, again, it's been really interesting to see how it's been framed. I think it's a very difficult, and I said this on the podcast, I think it's a very difficult game to analyse in isolation because my issue with it is that I've seen Norwich win like that before this season. Sunderland and Blackpool come to mind pretty quickly. And then everyone's kind of talked about them as foundation building wins and signs that the team has turned a corner and how they're difficult to play against and all of these various elements. And then obviously that the next bit hasn't come to pass. So for me, I didn't find it to be particularly inspiring in terms of when you stick them next to the comments that Dean Smith gave them. My impression of that was, as I said last week, a high press, energetic team, disruptive team. I didn't really see that. What I saw was a team quite quickly revert to a low block, really blunt, actually, particularly in the second half. I don't think they recorded a shot after the 39th minute, 36th minute maybe. So I have issues with the performance. It's been interesting to see a lot of people describe how well Norwich City defended, which I don't necessarily disagree with. But equally, I think you've got to factor in that Swansea were relatively toothless. I think we could have played until Monday and Swansea wouldn't have scored a goal. And of course, that is in part down to what Norwich City did, but they also didn't progress the ball in particularly good areas. I felt they were quite submissive to what Norwich City were trying to get them to do, which was play down the sides. They were happy to do that. And so in that regard, I felt that it wasn't a relatively, and I said this in the verdict as well, I thought it was a relatively nice game for Norwich City to start with in the break. I think it would have been a lot worse for them if they were playing a team that was really penetrative, that's a hard word to say, or really capable of providing some energy and maybe doing things a little bit differently. So I'm quite conflicted on it, and I actually feel that my analysis and my verdict on last weekend's win might be better after the win tomorrow because I think we'll have more context then. And obviously, Norwich haven't won back-to-back games in the Championship since mid-September, and this has kind of been the issue. So, I mean, they won 1-0 win on the road, absolutely not to be sniffed at all. I would be lying if I said I was absolutely blown away and felt that we're going to see a radically different second half of the season because, as things stand, I just don't see that to be the case, but I really hope I'm proven wrong.
Yeah, got positive news though this morning on the team news front. Obviously, at Swansea last week, Norwich City were missing the likes of Aaron Ramsey, Todd Cantwell, Marcelino Nunes, but all of those back available for this weekend. Smith stating it was just Johnny Rowe, who obviously has got that slightly long-term injury after his surgery, Sam Byram and Jakob Sorensen that are missing for this weekend's game. So kind of, obviously that's very positive news, but is there maybe an element now? Dean Smith's obviously spoke, well, some people call it excuses. He's obviously said at times this season he's not had a fully fit squad. This is as close probably to a fully fit squad that he's had. Going to tomorrow night's game, Blackburn third in the league. Is having a fully fit squad almost potentially, is that obviously a good thing in terms of competition-wise, but is it potentially that excuse he's had maybe in recent weeks now goes? Is that going to be detrimental and potentially causing further issues if they don't then go and perform and get a result tomorrow night?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's basically stripped all of the excuses away, hasn't it? There are no longer excuses for Norwich City. They have, if you look at squads purely on paper, and I think it might have been Brian Clough who said football isn't one on paper, and that's absolutely correct. But you look at it and you compare it, and again, this is where I kind of have issue with the win last week, which seems quite a contradictory statement, I admit. But you look at Norwich City's squad, it should be, and there've been maybe one game this season, which was Burnley away, where the team sheet has come in and I've looked at Norwich City's team, I've looked at the opposition's team and felt actually, that was on the one occasion actually where I felt, okay, Norwich don't have as strong a starting 11 as the team that they're playing. In every other game, I felt they had. Maybe you could throw Watford in there as well, possibly Sheffield United, but even that I think is a little bit of a stretch. So when you have that, and you have what is undoubtedly one of the highest paid teams in the league, a team full of Premier League experience, whether that's relevant or not to the challenge that they have, it does create a degree of expectation, and it does, I think, create an expectation that there should be an element of control and an element of probing and a degree of kind of being the protagonists in game to an extent. And that's probably what Norwich City have lacked. So that's where I think maybe the criticism to an extent has come from, because Norwich City don't look like a superior team at this level, at this moment in time. And so then people are looking at this squad and looking at on paper, as we said, or on a screen or whatever, and then they're watching it, and there's a massive disconnect there between the levels of quality that you see in those names that are there on that piece of paper to what you're seeing when they're actually together on a pitch. So I think that's maybe where a degree of the frustration comes from. And like you say, there have been mitigating circumstances behind that, why that has been the case. There's been injuries, suspensions. The fixture list has been absolutely relentless. To have played 22 games at this point in the Championship season is mad. I looked back actually in the 2020 season, which was the last time Norwich City played at this level and they won. They actually played on the 16th of December, which is today. They beat Reading 2-1. That was their 19th game of the season. So they're already kind of 3 games ahead of where they should be. So absolutely, those elements are now parked to one side, because that World Cup break acted as such a reset, such a clean slate, I guess, that now Norwich do have a fully fit squad. They do have options at left back. They aren't playing Kenny McLean there. They do have options in attacking areas. They do have Josh Sargent and Teemu Pukki fit. They do have Adam Ida back pushing first space. They do have Andrew Omobamidele pushing Grant Hanley and Ben Gibson. So you look at all of those various elements. There is now no longer any kind of excuse that you could form or create about why this Norwich City group should be underperforming. So again, we speak about expectation levels. In a weird way, actually, probably the World Cup break has increased those, I would say, slightly rather than decrease them. So this is a really interesting football match, because even though Norwich City won last weekend, certainly from the fans that I've spoken to this week, which is a fair number, I'm not really sure that a defeat would, or that victory, would mean that a defeat tomorrow would really shift the dial in terms of fan mood. I think we'd see it be quite pointed again, as it was in the second half of the Middlesbrough game. I don't think it would be, go over a tipping point or anything like that, but I think there would be frustrations there again. So absolutely a big game. I've just written about it there actually for my column for tomorrow, which is actually this Norwich City group in many ways. The key ingredient that they need, you can talk about off the ball, on the ball, is consistency. And of course, those elements are how you achieve consistency. But that is the umbrella thing that they need to achieve in the second half of the season. And that includes winning games, because if they fail to do it tomorrow, it will be 1 win in 7 at Carrow Road. That's not a record of a team that's getting promoted, I'm afraid. And also, it's a game against a team, as you said, that's third in the league, who I believe with a win would move 4 points ahead of Norwich. So that would create not just a gap to the top 2, which there is at the moment, but also a gap to the top 3. And if you're Norwich City, that becomes increasingly concerning. So the excuses are gone. They've got a fully fit squad. Now it's up to Dean Smith to mould it and ensure that they find a winning formula.
One young man that's kind of benefited from Norwich's injuries issues so far this season is young Liam Gibbs, although his performances on the whole have been excellent all season. I think he's more than merited his place in this squad. But Dean Smith spoke about him this morning. I'm going to play the clip and then we're going to talk about the midfield mix.
Yeah, no, overall, been really pleased with him. Had a really good pre-season with us. He trained, last 2 months of the season with us last year. We liked what we saw, and hence promoted him into the squad, and he's not let us down, and he's got a lot of development still to go, but he's in a good place, and he's I think his attitude and his application is what puts him in that place.
His 20th birthday today, Connor. he's sort of made a breakthrough in the team so far this season. But we've now seen the likes of Isaac Hayden returning, Gabriel Sarra's now more up to speed. Kenny McLean's obviously a consistent performer. So how challenging is it going to be for Liam Gibbs to get back into this team in the upcoming weeks? Obviously, we've now got this festive period where there's a lot of games in a short space of time. So is that potentially an opportunity for him in the coming games where maybe Dean Smith might be looking to rotate his squad with, fixture congestion?
I think he should be in the team. Paddy wrote a really good column on this earlier in the week, actually, and it was interesting to hear Dean Smith speak about him this morning, because that's kind of the midfielder that I've seen when he's played, actually, and he has a range of qualities that I think Norwich City's midfield has been lacking for parts of this season. That ability to switch play, to keep the ball moving, to set a tempo, to have some degree of control. I think he's one of those players that can help you assert control, particularly in possession. He's pretty careful with the ball. He's good to watch. Physically, he's very good as well. So I think all of those elements you would want in your football team, particularly the way Norwich City have been performing. So I think I kind of see it playing out in two ways. Either an opportunity presents itself through, and obviously, hopefully not an injury or a suspension or whatever, or he is kind of drip-fed moments and he impresses in those and leapfrogs the players in front of them. But I don't feel that experience is enough, if I'm honest, to be keeping him out of the team at the moment. I think he's been quite harshly treated in some respects, because actually the performances, particularly in the opening part of the season, was very good and probably warranted a longer run in the team than he's been given. Obviously, he had the injury, which affected things a little bit, and that game, you might be able to remind me who it is against, where he came back in. I think it might have been Watford, wasn't it? And he looked slightly off it, which is understandable. I think there is also a degree of, we need to remember what he is. He's 20 today, which is still incredibly young for a footballer. But this really is his first kind of breakthrough season. He's been playing largely academy football. He had a few appearances for Ipswich under Paul Lambert in sort of the Papa John's Trophy and in games like that. I think he was on the bench a couple of times, but he's never had a consistent run of games. So there does need to be a degree of kind of curbing of those expectations, because he is so young. And I think that is maybe what Dean Smith would point to, and Daniel Farke did this a lot with young players as well, would almost sort of dangle the carrot in front of them and then every so often pull it away to keep the hunger there and to stop them getting comfortable. So I don't necessarily mind that, but I'd like to see him get a run of games, because I think that actually, as I said, you look at his skill set, I think that there's some quite unique attributes in there, and actually attributes that Norwich City need. And I just think he's going to be a wonderful footballer, and his development for me would be better served by putting him in the team at this moment, even though he isn't fully polished, alongside players like Isaac Hayden and with the experience that he has, Kenny McLean as well. What an experience that would be for him, and would also offer him a degree of security, but also add Norwich with a degree of security as well, because he's not quite refined. So I think he should be in there. How that looks and what it looks like and how it sort of progresses and transitions over the next few weeks, I think is going to be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, going to flip the conversation to tomorrow night's opposition, Blackburn Rovers. The visitors are third in the league at the moment, but they've kind of got that bizarre stat where they've won 12 games, lost 10, yet to draw a game so far this season. And I spoke to a Blackburn fan yesterday afternoon on Terrace Talk, and he kind of spoke about maybe this lack of squad depth in that Blackburn squad potentially is causing them a few issues. I mean, they've obviously been on the end of a couple of heavy defeats in their last two games, particularly against rivals as well, a 3-0 defeat against Burnley and 4-1 against Preston last weekend. So a few danger men in there. Connor, Brereton, Diaz, we all know what he's going to provide. One of the best finishers in the Championship, as Dean Smith, alluded to him this morning, and likes of Bradley Dack. I mean, a few injury issues with him over recent years, but he's definitely a talented player. So have you had a chance to watch much of Blackburn so far this season, Connor? And where do you maybe, sort of pitch them in terms of where they'll be at the end of the season?
Yeah, I've actually watched portions of their last two games. I felt the Burnley result was a tad harsh, if I'm honest. I thought they weren't great, but they probably weren't as bad as the scoreline suggests. Preston last week, I mean, it was kind of on in the background, wasn't it, in the press room at Swansea? So we watched a little bit of that, and it was quite concerning, I would say, from a Blackburn perspective. But I wouldn't necessarily discount this on the basis of their last two results. I think their last two results combined is a 7-1 defeat, isn't it? So they have ship goals. Dean Smith described them as the entertainers. I think they will want to come to Carrow Road and have control of possession. The way Norwich City play, I could see them being afforded huge amounts in the game where they have the ball and are able to move it. And I think they have attacking players that can hurt teams. You mentioned Brereton Diaz, obviously being the primary one. Bradley Dack is a very good player. They've got Dolan as well, who I like. And it's going to be interesting to see how they approach it in terms of tactically, because Thomason has, as Dean Smith again pointed out this morning, often match teams up. And sometimes that can have a really positive effect, and sometimes it doesn't work so well, particularly when you're constantly switching systems and you're coming up against a team who maybe has a bit more familiarity of said system than you do. So it does create a little bit of, or can create a little bit of inconsistency, which I think we've seen. But the fact that they've almost had the 4-1 defeat last weekend, you're expecting some kind of response, I would say, and you're expecting. Particularly, I think when teams come to Carrow Road, there's a degree that they raise their game anyway, because Norwich are in the Premier League. There's that allure. Everyone thinks that they're going to be towards the top of the division. It is a really good litmus test for where you want to be. And Blackburn, obviously, third with an opportunity to extend that gap, or if Norwich City win, to fall behind them. So that's a really interesting kind of setup for them, because actually the rewards are there if they wanted to go and win the game. But actually, from their perspective, you're probably looking at it and going, just don't lose it. Particularly after the two results that they've had. So, I mean, I think it's really difficult to predict with Blackburn. It wouldn't surprise me if they turned up and looked like prime Barcelona, and it wouldn't surprise me if Norwich turned up and actually, because of last weekend's result, had a bit more confidence and were buoyed by the return of the Norwich City fans, and hopefully that could propel them to a victory. So, again, I can kind of see all three results, but I'm expecting tomorrow to be quite a tough test, if I'm honest. I think Blackburn will be a lot tougher than perhaps their results have shown in the last 2 weeks, or two games. Sorry.
Yeah, Grant Hanley will be probably looking forward to tomorrow's game. Obviously, an academy product of the Blackburn Rovers academy, so definitely one for him. But staying on the theme of defence, just want to talk about the left back battle, Connor. And I thought personally, Sam McCallum was very, very poor against Swansea. Got caught out quite a few times. Really, really struggled to get to grips with them. So, is there an opportunity for Dimitris Giannoulis? Obviously, he got subbed on last weekend. We kind of know there's been that sort of ongoing battle between those two so far this season. Injuries have kind of dictated which one's maybe been given the opportunity. So, in the upcoming games, which one of those do you maybe think is the front runner for Dean Smith in terms of the left back option?
I think Giannoulis is the first choice. I think if those two would have been fit all season, you'd have seen Giannoulis start a lot more games than McCallum. I think. Although I think it's a pretty close battle by all accounts, I do think Giannoulis edges it, particularly from an attacking perspective. And given what I've said about this league and Norwich City, and how I personally would approach this league if I was given the keys to this Norwich City squad, I think I would be much more inclined to have Giannoulis there than McCallum at this moment in time. I agree. I felt sort of after the break, he had a really wobbly 15-20 minute spell, didn't he, where he just couldn't seem to get a pass right and find a man, which was really difficult. But I really like Sam McCallum as a footballer. He's still incredibly young as well. So it's not a bad position to be in, the one that he's in at this moment in time. He will get opportunities because of the volume of games and the relentlessness of the schedule. Giannoulis himself has had injuries and issues over the last few months. I just think Giannoulis gives you more from an attacking perspective. I think he probably gives the squad a greater balance. He's better on the ball as well, in my opinion. He's better in the final third in terms of his decision-making. I actually think Sam McCallum's probably a better defender, if you wanted to use those terms, than him. And I think there's still some issues about Giannoulis from a defensive perspective. But I would have Giannoulis back in the side. I think now he's had that World Cup break to recuperate after that injury. I think you'd almost want to see him. There was one instance last weekend where he got beaten pretty easily. I think it was by Oko Flex for a cross, which was a little bit of a concern. But I'm looking at kind of the advantages that he gives you going forward, right? Perhaps rather than that, and given the onus, I think will be on Norwich City to try and control the game tomorrow and have a degree of forward thrust. I think Giannoulis gives you that little bit of edge on the left, particularly if Norwich play with perhaps. As I fear they might do on the left with a more kind of central player, if that makes sense. Someone, I think Sargent played on the left last week, didn't he? I think he'll be moved back to the right, and I could see actually a Campbell in there, and he is naturally going to drift inside. So you're going to want some width, and I think Giannoulis will give you that from an attacking perspective. So although I think it's a battle that will go on and on and on throughout the weeks, I think after last weekend you'd probably be inclined to give Giannoulis a go and see how he gets on.
Yeah, before we go to the score predictions, any last comments, get them down in the comment section below. We'll be live for another sort of 5 or so minutes. So I want to get your take on Dean Smith's comments this morning regarding sort of the Carrow Road issue. I mean, they've only won one game in their last 6 there. He kind of spoke about fans being happy if Norwich win and maybe being unhappy if they don't. What was your take on that? Because I think there's probably an element of the fan base that are maybe frustrated, even if Norwich are winning at the moment, due to performances. So maybe what does Norwich need to do tomorrow at Carrow Road to maybe get the fans on board really early?
Yeah, I've spoken about this before. I think in many ways it's a bit of an existential crisis because Norwich City, when they've come down at this level before, have won the league and it's looked a certain way. And when you have, as I was saying, that kind of maybe disparity between the quality that is perceived to be in their squad compared to what we're seeing on the pitch at the moment, the expectation is that not just winning, because winning is par, really. Winning is the kind of benchmark. You need to do more than that. So you probably need to perform like you're too good for this division. And I think actually a lot of the performances this season, to me anyway, I haven't seen a performance where I thought, wow, this Norwich team is going to finish in the top 2. It's pretty consistently for me been, okay, this looks like a team that's probably going to finish in the playoffs. So you look at it, and again, you look at that, rightly or wrongly, that disparity that I speak about. And I think it creates the expectation that Norwich City should be asserting themselves more. They should be controlling games. And by control, there's obviously different ways to control a football match. I mean, they should be controlling games with the ball and controlling oppositions. And actually, in many ways, I think tomorrow's game is quite handy because I think Blackburn will come and try and be quite a bit more progressive than we've seen from other teams. Middlesbrough were very progressive in the second half and reaped the rewards of that. But a lot of teams have had real joy from just sitting in a low block and hitting Norwich on the counter, essentially. So I think in many ways it may be a game that actually suits Norwich, which is probably beneficial. But the Carrow Road issue, I think, is really interesting. I wouldn't necessarily pit it down to just an atmosphere thing. I think it's very easy to pigeonhole it as that. Oh, Carrow Road, they're not performing very well at home because it's a difficult crowd to play in front of. I don't really subscribe to that view because, again, this is a Norwich City team that should be better than the sum of its parts, but also than a lot of the oppositions that come to Carrow Road. And so you have to find a formula. So for me, I feel the fans responding to what they're seeing on the pitch in terms of performances. And like I say, that expectation maybe isn't fair, certainly from a Dean Smith perspective, because he's not managed Norwich City at this level before. So he hasn't done stuff in a certain way previously. But it's there and it's hard to ignore it. And when you've gone from feast to famine's probably a bit strong, but certainly a different approach that maybe isn't so free-flowing and open and attacking, and where the emphasis is so much on them to produce something, I think it does become a little bit more difficult to watch. Plus, there's a general, I feel, frustration at football more generally, because what sort of prizes promotion for Norwich City at the moment, because history shows that actually getting promoted is not necessarily a good thing. It's quite a traumatic experience, if anything. So when that's the prize, but also the performances are how they have been, it's very difficult then to kind of really get behind the team. And every win doesn't feel like the fairy tale that it did in Daniel Farke's first season, or there wasn't a revenge story. There's this lack of narrative this season where Norwich City just have to win because they've got a team that is better. I mean, it's a really intriguing one, and we could have a debate for 40 minutes to an hour about all of the reasons why this season feels so weird. But in a nutshell, if Norwich City want to get the Carrow Road team crowd behind them, this season has proven they have to do more than winning games. They have to win games in a certain way and look and function in a certain way. For me, let's just see a performance that's a bit longer than 20 minutes.
And with that, Connor, are the fans going to be happy tomorrow evening at Carrow Road? Obviously, 5:30 under the lights on Sky Sports. Norwich not been great on Sky so far this season, if I sort of recall. So, score prediction for this one. How do you see this game going? And what do Norwich need to do well tomorrow night to get a result?
Yeah, I think Norwich will win tomorrow. I think they'll win 2-0. I think, which maybe contradicts some of the stuff I'm saying, but as I said to you, I can see the game manoeuvring around various different paths. But I'm going to be positive and say that I think Blackburn will come and try and play, and that will leave space for Norwich to exploit, and they look better when they attack with plenty of spaces. So, yeah, I'm going to go with a 2-0 Norwich win, and hopefully it's the ending of obviously a few runs, and we're talking about 2 wins in 7 rather than 1 than 6, and we're also talking about the fact that they've just won back-to-back championship games for the first time since mid-September. So what's that technique called? Isn't it positive, is it reinforcement? No, it can't be reinforcement. Positive something where you imagine something into existence. That's what I'm trying to do. There is a term. Maybe someone will comment and say what it is. It's escaped me at the moment. But yeah, that's kind of how I hope and how I want to see the game go. What about you? How do you see this game going? Because it feels like Norwich are even going to win or Blackburn are going to win, right? Which maybe we're talking up now for a 2-2 draw.
Yeah, it's all written to be Blackburn's first draw, but I went 3-1 yesterday on Terrace Talk. I think Blackburn's sort of ability to ship goals at the moment is a big issue. I think Timu Pukki is obviously, well, he's now overtaken Robert Fleck in the sort of goal scoring charts. So he's now got Ewan Roberts in his sights. He loves the goal against Blackburn as well. I think it's three goals in 4 games against Blackburn, although they've all come at Ewood Park. So definitely one to look out for on that one tomorrow. I think he might get on the score sheet. So feeling positive, much more positive. Hopefully a bit of festive cheer as well, because obviously this is the final game before Christmas. So chance to go third in the league. So yeah, fingers crossed we can get a positive result. Norwich Talk there.
That's right. There we go. Cheers, Ben.
There we go. That will round off the show. Thanks for joining us this Friday lunchtime. Of course, lots of great content across our channels at the moment. There's a special Pink 'Un podcast if you've not got around to listening to that. Connor spoke to Martin O'Neill, obviously a well-known Norwich City face in terms of a player and a manager. Lots of really nice stories in there. Talk about Wes Houlihan and managing him, and what is sort of that goal against Ipswich as well that he got in the derby. So lots of really great stuff in there, and life in Norfolk. Of course, Dean Smith's press conference from this morning is up across our channels at the moment, so you can go and listen to all the key quotes and team news ahead of this one. And yeah, lots of other great content across our channels. Obviously, as always, Pink 'Un Plus app is the place to go. Free trial, $1.99 a month thereafter. That's definitely well worth a look if you're not a Pink 'Un Plus subscriber already. We'll all be at the game tomorrow, so obviously all your usual match build up and match reaction will be across our channels. Obviously 4:30 tomorrow for team news. So if you're not if you're not at Carrow Road and you want to know the team news, that's the place to go. So with that, we'll round off the show. Thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend. Fingers crossed Norwich City can deliver 3 points again. That would be much welcome.